My name is Alan, and I'm 58 years old. I've worked hard my whole life. My hands are calloused from years of fixing machines. My back sore from the hours spent bent over engines in cold garages. I've never been one to complain. Life is about doing what needs to be done, and I've always done my best. But the truth is, I've never had much beyond the essentials: a small house, a steady job as a mechanic, and an old truck that had been in the family for years. That truck, a 1989 Chevy Silverado, wasn't just any vehicle, it was a symbol of everything I had, everything I loved. My father had bought it when I was 18. We spent countless weekends working on it together, fixing the engine, replacing parts, getting our hands dirty. It was the heart of the family, tied to memories of road trips, family get-togethers, and the quiet satisfaction of fixing something with your own hands. But as the years went by, the truck slowly became a relic. The engine sputtered, the paint faded, and eventually, it just sat in the driveway. Every time I looked at it, I thought about my dad, my brother, and all the good times that felt like they were slipping further away. My brother, Tom, passed away in a car accident a few years ago, and since then, the truck had become more of a reminder than a tool. But it was mine. It meant something. I wasn't ready to let it go, no matter how many people told me it was just taking up space. Then came the day Chris asked me about it. Chris, my son, at 22, he was still figuring out his life. He had just finished college, and like many young men, he was starting to feel the weight of responsibility. The kind of responsibility I hadn't always been able to share with him when he was growing up. I had been a father in fits and starts there when I could be, but too often distracted by work and life. I didn't always know how to connect with him, but I tried. I loved him. I always did. One evening, after a long day at the shop, Chris came into the living room, sitting down beside me like he had when he was younger. "Dad," he said casually, "I've been thinking about the truck." I looked up from the TV, already feeling a shift in the air. The truck had been sitting there for years, unused. I knew it was only a matter of time before he would bring it up. "You're not thinking of selling it, are you?" I asked, half joking. He hesitated for a second, then shrugged. "Maybe. It's not doing anyone any good just sitting there, right? I could probably get a couple $100 for it. Pay off some bills." The word stung more than I expected. My chest tightened, and I tried to hide the knot in my stomach. Chris was trying to be practical, but it felt like he was cutting a tie that I wasn't ready to sever. That truck wasn't just a hunk of metal, it was a connection to the past. It was part of the family, part of me. I exhaled slowly. "A couple $100. That truck's worth more than that." "I don't think it is, Dad," he said. "It's falling apart. The engine doesn't even start right anymore. It's just taking up space." I stared at him, trying to gauge if this was just a passing thought or if he was really serious. I knew he had his own financial struggles, college loans, rent, the usual pressures, but something about hearing him say it made it feel final, like he wasn't just talking about a truck. He was talking about letting go of something I had held onto for so long. "I'll be honest with you," Chris continued. "I could fix it up, sell it, and have some extra cash. It's not like I'm getting rid of it for good, just for now." I looked at him, struggling to find the words. I had spent years keeping that truck around, telling myself I'd fix it one day, telling myself the memories attached to it were worth more than the rust that had settled in. But was I really ready to let it go? To just let someone else take it, piece it out for parts, and leave me with an empty driveway? The silence hung between us, thick and uncomfortable. "You can sell it," I said finally, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I'm not ready to part with it." "Not yet." Chris seemed to accept that. He didn't argue, he just nodded. But something about his eyes made me feel like I was missing something. Like he didn't see the truck the way I did. Or maybe, he didn't see me the way I saw myself. The next morning, I woke up to find the truck gone. The driveway was empty. There was no sign of it, no note, no explanation. It was just gone. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where it used to sit. My chest tightened, and I felt a pang of loss I hadn't expected. Chris had taken it, sold it, and I wasn't sure if I was angry or just heartbroken. But it didn't matter now. The truck was gone. What was left was a question. What had I really lost? That afternoon, Chris came home. He seemed cheerful enough, but there was an odd look in his eyes. "You sold it, didn't you?" I asked, my voice a little more strained than I meant it to be. He hesitated. "Yeah, I did. I got $200 for it. I thought I'd try to make a little money off it." $200, I repeated, barely able to disguise my disappointment. "For that truck, it was the best offer," he said quickly. "But I found something in the glove box when I was cleaning it out. Thought you might want to know." I frowned. "What did you find?" He held up a small weathered envelope. It was old, the edges frayed. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the handwriting on it. It was my handwriting. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice suddenly thick. Chris looked at me, confused. "I don't know." It was tucked in the glove box under some papers. I took the envelope from him, hands shaking. I carefully opened it. Inside were a few old, faded documents and something I wasn't expecting. A key. the key to a safe deposit box I thought I had lost years ago, and I had no idea what was inside. But now, I had a feeling Chris had just uncovered something that would change everything. I stared at the key in my hand, the cold metal reflecting the light in the room. I turned it over, almost expecting to see something written on it, but there was nothing, just a simple, old-fashioned brass key, like the kind you'd find in a dusty drawer in a forgotten corner of an attic. My fingers trembled as I looked at Chris, who was still standing in the doorway, waiting for some kind of reaction. "Dad?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts. The key felt too important, too familiar, for it to be just a random thing I'd forgotten about. There was no way I would have left a key in the truck and completely forgotten about it, but I hadn't seen it in years. I shook my head slowly, my mind racing. "I don't know," I finally muttered, still staring at the key. "I don't know where this came from." Chris stepped forward, more curious now. "Well, it was in the glove box. There were a few old papers, but this was the only thing that seemed important." "Important," I repeated, trying to focus on what he was saying. "Chris, where did you sell the truck?" His brows furrowed. "What? The truck? I sold it to a guy named Jim. Said he was going to fix it up, get it running again. You know, use it for his business." Jim. I didn't know a Jim, not off the top of my head, at least, but it didn't matter. The real issue wasn't who bought the truck, it was what I was holding in my hand. I glanced at the envelope again, the familiar handwriting on the edge of the yellowed paper. It was unmistakably mine, but I hadn't written anything like this in years. The handwriting was from a time I couldn't quite place, and the documents inside the envelope were things I didn't recognize at all. The moment I unfolded the papers, a surge of memory hit me. The dates were from over 20 years ago. The first page had an old bank receipt, the kind you'd get from a safe deposit box. It was from a bank I hadn't been to in nearly 2 decades, the one I used to go to with my father. I swallowed hard as the realization sank in. This wasn't just an old key, it was a key to a secret I'd buried for years. "Dad," Chris's voice broke through my thoughts. "What's going on? What is this?" I looked up, my mouth dry. "This is a key to an old safe deposit box. One I opened with my father before he passed." Chris blinked, processing it. "But why would it be in the truck? Why didn't you tell me about this before?" "I didn't even remember it was there," I said quietly. "I haven't thought about it in years." I tried to gather my composure, but the words kept slipping away from me. The more I thought about that key, the more I realized how much I had forgotten, how much I had buried. I stood up, walking toward the coat closet where I kept my things. My mind was racing now, flashing back to the things I didn't want to remember, the arguments, the decisions that pulled me away from my past, the mistakes I made when I was too young to understand the consequences. "What is it, Dad? What's in the box?" Chris asked, his voice hesitant. I paused, turning back to him. The truth was, I didn't know what was in the box, but I had a feeling that opening it was going to change everything. There were things I'd left behind, decisions I'd made that I regretted, and secrets I didn't even realize I was keeping. And now, this truck, my old truck, had somehow brought it all back to the surface. "I think I need to go to the bank," I said, my voice hoarse. "The key, it's to a safe deposit box. My father and I put something in there a long time ago. I thought it was lost, but I was wrong. Do you want me to come with you?" Chris asked. I shook my head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." The drive to the bank felt longer than it was. It was as though the distance between here and there was measured in the weight of the years I had spent trying to forget. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and every minute that passed made the knot in my stomach tighten. When I finally arrived, I took a deep breath. The place hadn't changed in years. Same brick walls, same old wooden doors that had seen more than their share of secrets. The same teller from years ago smiled at me when I approached the counter. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rivers," she said kindly. "How can I help you?" "I need to access a safe deposit box," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a long time since I've been here." She looked at her computer screen and then smiled. "Of course, we'll need to check your ID, and we'll get that set up for you." I followed her to the back of the bank where the safe deposit boxes were kept. My heart pounded in my chest as we walked, the familiar hum of the lights overhead doing little to calm my nerves. The moment the small metal box slid open in front of me, I froze. Inside was a small stack of papers. One of them had my father's handwriting on it. The letter inside didn't just hold a memory, it held a secret I never knew about. It read, "Alan, if you're reading this, I'm long gone. But there's something I need you to know before it's too late." I turned the paper over, barely able to breathe. I wasn't ready for what I was about to learn. The secret was buried deep, and now it was all coming to light. I stared at the letter, the paper trembling in my hands. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, neat, deliberate, as if every word had been carefully chosen. The letter felt like it had been waiting for me all these years, sealed in the safe deposit box, hidden away until now. "Alan, if you're reading this, I'm long gone. But there's something I need you to know before it's too late. I swallowed hard, the words thick in my throat. There was so much weight behind that sentence, and I could feel the years of silence pressing down on me. I carefully unfolded the letter, but before I could read the next line, the bank teller spoke up, her voice cutting through the tense silence in the small room. "Are you okay, Mr. Rivers?" she asked softly, her tone a bit concerned. I nodded quickly, too distracted to answer properly. "Yeah, I just need a minute." She stepped back, giving me space, and I felt a chill run through my body as I looked down at the paper again. The rest of the letter was written in the same careful script. I exhaled shakily and began to read. "I've lived a good life, but there's something I need to confess to you. Alan, it's about the truck, the one I bought for you when you were young. I never told you the whole story behind it, about how it came into my hands, and why I gave it to you. I thought I could protect you by keeping this secret, but it's too late now. You need to know the truth." My heart began to race. The truck, this was about the truck. But what was the connection? I'd never asked my father about it before, never needed to. He'd bought it for me. We worked on it together, and that was that. Or so I thought. I kept reading, but the words blurred slightly. That truck wasn't just a gift, it was part of a deal I made with a man named Robert Weaver. I know you never knew him, but he was a man who had a claim to something I thought was mine. A debt owed, a promise made long ago. The truck was part of that agreement. And now, Alan, I need you to understand why I kept this from you. I blinked. The name Robert Weaver sounded foreign. I didn't recognize it, but the fact that my father had made some kind of deal involving the truck that sent a sharp pang through me. What had my father done? Why had he kept this from me? The letter went on. "The debt I owed was more than money, Alan. It was a promise to take care of something valuable. A promise that was meant to protect you from things I never wanted you to know. But now, as I'm sure you've already guessed, there's someone else who needs to know what's in that truck's glove box. And it's not just the papers you'll find. It's the reason the truck was always more than just a truck. The deal I made was to protect you from a family secret, one that I hoped would die with me. But now that you're reading this, it's time for you to take up the mantle of the truth." My hands were shaking, and the room felt smaller. The world around me suddenly seemed too loud, too heavy. I read the letter again, trying to absorb what my father was telling me. A deal, a family secret. My mind was spinning. What had he gotten involved in? What kind of debt was he talking about? I looked up, trying to steady myself. My thoughts were racing, but the letter in front of me kept pulling me back. "You need to go to the old warehouse on the corner of 12th and Pine. It's still there. I think the key I gave you, it's not just for the truck, it's for what's inside the warehouse. It's something you need to see before you can fully understand. If you don't find what you're looking for, come back to me. I'll be waiting." I froze. The key wasn't just for the truck, it was for something hidden in a warehouse. I swallowed hard, trying to grasp what I was reading. What was my father involved in? Who was Robert Weaver? And why hadn't he told me any of this before? I looked at the documents in the envelope again, the receipts, the old insurance papers, and now this letter, a message from the past that made everything feel like it was falling apart. "Chris," I murmured to myself, "what have you gotten yourself into?" I stood up, my legs feeling weak beneath me. The room seemed to be closing in, the walls pressing in like they were threatening to swallow me whole. The old, faded papers from the envelope felt like an anchor, holding me in place as I tried to process everything I had just learned. As I walked out of the bank, the weight of my father's words sank deeper into my chest. The truck, the warehouse, the deal, the debt, the truth I never knew existed. The world outside was bright, but I felt like I was drowning in a sea of questions. I couldn't go back now. I had to find out what this all meant, and what my father had kept hidden from me for all these years. I needed to go to that warehouse. But something told me it wouldn't be as simple as just walking in and getting answers. There was a reason he kept this secret, and whatever it was going to change everything, and I wasn't ready for what I was about to find. Chris had no idea what was hidden in that truck. And now, neither did I, but we were about to find out. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. The words hung in my mind like a constant, nagging weight. My father's cryptic message about a debt, a promise, and a secret that had been buried for years. It was too much to process, yet I couldn't walk away from it. I had to know the truth. I stood outside the old warehouse, the one on the corner of 12th and Pine, the one my father had mentioned. The building was as dilapidated as I remembered from the few times I'd passed by it over the years. Its brick walls were crumbling, windows boarded up, and the large rusted door looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. I wasn't sure what I expected to find inside, but the feeling of unease gnawed at me. This wasn't just about an old truck anymore. This was something far bigger, something that had been hidden from me, and something that I had no choice but to uncover now. I glanced down at the small, worn key in my hand, the one that had once opened the glove box of that old truck. My father had said it would unlock something here, but I wasn't sure what. The truth? My future? Whatever it was, I was about to find out. I took a deep breath and walked toward the warehouse. The door creaked loudly as I turned the heavy handle, the sound echoing in the empty street. I pushed it open, the door groaning against the weight of years. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. I stepped into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The beam of sunlight from the cracked window illuminated only a sliver of the room. The rest was shrouded in shadows. The warehouse smelled of mold and rust, of forgotten time and abandoned memories. There was a sense of silence here, but not the peaceful kind. This was the kind of silence that came from secrets buried deep, waiting to be uncovered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key, holding it tightly in my hand as I scanned the room. Where do I even start? I walked slowly, my boots echoing on the cement floor, trying to find some clue, some sign of what my father had left behind. The place was mostly empty stacks of old crates, some broken furniture, and piles of discarded papers scattered around. But then, near the far corner, I saw something that stood out. A small, locked door, tucked away behind a pile of dusty boxes. My pulse quickened. This was it. I approached the door cautiously, the weight of the key in my hand, making my fingers itch. I had no idea what was behind that door, but my instincts told me it was the key to everything. My father's debt, the promise, the family secret. The lock on the door was old, but the key fit perfectly. I turned it slowly, and with a soft click, the door creaked open. What I saw inside shocked me. The room was small, but it was filled with old documents, boxers, and metal filing cabinets. A faint glow from a hanging light bulb revealed rows of stacked files, some yellowed with age, others covered in a thick layer of dust. But what stood out the most was a large wooden chest sitting in the corner. It was old, covered in worn leather, and looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The chest wasn't just something you found lying around. It felt important. I stepped toward it, my breath catching in my throat. I crouched down and lifted the latch, the metal groaning as it opened. Inside was a collection of papers, carefully stacked and tied together with a piece of twine. My hands shook as I picked up the first bundle. The top page was covered in formal writing, and I recognized it immediately. It was a contract. I scanned the words quickly, and what I saw sent a chill through my entire body. This wasn't just any contract. It was a business deal, one that involved my father, Robert Weaver, and a third party I didn't recognize. It outlined agreements, terms, and dates that made my head spin. But the most disturbing part, it was signed by my father and Robert Weaver, but there was one more signature at the bottom. Mine. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. My signature on a contract that was written years before I was even born. I grabbed the next stack of papers, flipping through them quickly. There were more contracts, more agreements, but they all pointed back to the same thing. My father had been part of something far bigger than I could have imagined. This was no ordinary debt. This was something involving family, something that had been passed down through the generations. I was a part of something I didn't even know existed. As I read through the contracts, one sentence kept jumping out at me. The heir to the legacy is bound by this agreement. No exceptions. I stopped breathing. The legacy. What legacy? I had been bound to this secret since before I was born. My father had made deals, promises, and choices that had affected my life without me even knowing. And it all came back to this moment. I had been tied to a legacy I didn't even understand. I looked at the chest again. There had to be more. I pulled out a few more bundles of paper, but then something caught my eye, something out of place. A small box, tucked underneath the pile of papers. My heart raced as I reached for it. The box was small, wooden, with intricate carvings along the edges. I lifted the lid, and what I saw inside made my stomach drop. A photograph. It was old, torn at the edges, but the faces were clear. My father, younger, standing with a man I didn't recognize, Robert Weaver. But what struck me the most was the woman standing between them. Her face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar about her. Her eyes. I stared at the photo for a long time, the puzzle pieces slowly starting to come together. And then, in the corner of the photo, written in my father's handwriting, "For Alan, the secret we never spoke of." The truth I had been looking for my entire life wasn't just buried in that warehouse. It was buried in my own blood. And the deeper I went, the more I realized there were things about my past, about my family, that would change everything I thought I knew. And I was just beginning to understand the weight of that truth. But Chris, he had no idea what kind of secret he had unearthed when he sold that truck, and neither did I. The room felt too small as I held the photograph in my hands, staring at the faces frozen in time. My father, Robert Weaver, and the woman whose name I didn't yet know, standing between them. The handwriting in the corner burned into my mind. "For Alan. The secret we never spoke of." The words seemed to echo in the cold, empty warehouse. My breath caught in my throat. There was something I didn't understand, but I could feel it, the weight of it. The history. My father had hidden something from me, something he knew would change everything. But what was it? What was this legacy I'd been tied to since before I was born? I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but the questions piled on top of each other. Who was the woman in the photograph? Why had my father been involved with Robert Weaver, and why hadn't he told me any of this? I flipped through the rest of the papers in the box, searching for answers, anything that could make sense of this family secret. The contracts, the agreements, the legal jargon, it all blurred together until I reached the last page. And there, at the bottom, was something I hadn't seen before. A will. A will that had been signed by my father, Robert Weaver, and the unknown woman in the photograph. It outlined ownership, inheritance, and terms that involved not just money but property, businesses, and land. And at the very end, in bold letters, it said, "To Alan Rivers, the rightful heir to the Weaver estate, to be claimed when the time is right." I froze. I was the heir. The words felt like they were suffocating me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my family, was a lie. My father had left me this legacy, this inheritance that had been kept from me for my entire life. Suddenly, the pieces started to click, but it wasn't the way I wanted them to. Robert Weaver hadn't just been a family friend, he hadn't just been a man who'd done business with my father. He was part of a much darker history, a history my father had tried to bury, a history I was now entangled in. The Weaver estate, the legacy I didn't know about, this wasn't just about money or property, it was about something deeper, something hidden, and my father had known. He'd known this day would come when I would find the truth. I grabbed the letter from the chest again, reading through it one more time. The pieces were there, but I was struggling to make them fit. And then, the realization hit me like a blow to the chest. My son, Chris, he had no idea what he had just stumbled upon. He had no idea what he'd sold. That truck, the truck had been more than just an old vehicle. It was the key to everything. And now, the truth was starting to surface. I couldn't keep this from him. I couldn't keep it from my own son any longer. Chris needed to know the truth about the truck, about Robert Weaver, about what I had just uncovered. I walked out of the warehouse, the key still heavy in my pocket, the will in my hands, my mind reeling. The sunlight felt too bright, like I was seeing the world with new eyes. My entire life had been built on a foundation of lies, and now, I was standing at the edge of something so much bigger than I could have imagined. When I got home, Chris was sitting at the kitchen table, looking over a few bills. He looked up when I entered, but there was an unreadable expression on his face. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of how to begin. But I knew I had to tell him. I couldn't keep this from him, not after everything. "Chris," I said, my voice tight, "we need to talk." He raised an eyebrow. "What's going on, Dad?" I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but it had to be said. "About the truck," I began. "There's something I should have told you before. Something I should have told you years ago. Your grandfather, he wasn't just protecting me by giving me that truck. It's more than just a memory." Chris looked confused. "What do you mean?" I walked over to the table and set the papers down in front of him, the photo, the will, the documents that had changed everything. "That truck, it's part of something bigger. My father, Robert Weaver, and a woman you don't know, they were all part of a legacy. A deal they made long before I was born. And now, I've inherited it. All of it." Chris's face shifted. "What do you mean inherited?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to find the words. "I didn't know, Chris, I didn't know what was being passed down. But the truth is I'm tied to the Weaver estate. You're tied to it too. And everything that comes with it, the property, the money, the family ties, it's all ours." Chris stood up, shaking his head. "Wait, what? You're telling me this is about a what? Inheritance? A bunch of money?" I nodded. "Yes, but it's more than that. There's more to this than just money. The Weaver estate is built on something dark. There's a reason my father tried to hide this from me. A reason he kept it from both of us. And now that it's all out in the open, we have to face what comes next." He stepped back, looking at the papers like they were foreign, like they didn't belong to him. "This doesn't make sense. Dad, you're saying we have to deal with all this? With Robert Weaver's legacy? I don't even know what that means." I looked at him, knowing what I had to say next. "It means, son, that everything we thought we knew about our family is about to change. And whether we like it or not, we're part of something that goes far beyond anything we ever imagined." For the first time in my life, I felt like everything was slipping away. The truck, the inheritance, the family secrets, it was all too much. But as Chris and I stood there, facing the truth, I knew one thing for sure. The past had caught up with us, and there was no turning back. We were part of something bigger than either of us could control. And what came next? That was something we would have to face together.